Hi everybody, long time no see. I'm Noah Schwartz, and once again it's time for another edition of Blunation. This is your home for the latest sports headlines, both with the Blugolds and the rest of the wide world of sports. Let's get started. We begin with the Blugold baseball team, who have been looking to continue to develop in their third season as a program. On their spring break trip to Florida, the Blugolds won 4 games, including March 21st's game against Bard College, where junior right-hander Matt Moore threw the first no-hitter in program history. Moore struck out 10 en route to a 7-0 victory. The Blugolds were also able to continue their winning ways the next day as they beat Hobart College 23-11. Wow! As it stands now, the Blugolds sit at 5-7 on the season, and they'll be back on the field Saturday, April Fool's Day, against UW Stout. On the other diamond, the Blugold softball team had their own spring break trip to warmer places as they competed in the Spring Games tournament down in Florida. Over the course of the break, the Blugolds went 5-3 over the course of 8 games to up their overall record to 9-7. This weekend, they'll look to pick up a few more wins as they'll travel to Iowa to take on Central College and Luther College. And the Blugold women's lacrosse team was in action last night as the team hosted Hamline University in their home opener at Simpson Field. Offense was the name of the game for Eau Claire, as sophomore midfielder Alexi Romanelli scored 4 goals and freshman midfielder Regan Werner added 3 more to help the Blugolds to an 11-8 win. The victory moves the team's record to 2-3 on the season, and they'll look to get to 500 on Sunday when they play host to WIAC rival UW Stout. Meanwhile, in pro sports, the biggest story of the last few weeks still hasn't happened yet. Wait, Lee, that's the wrong graphic. Could you? There you go, thank you. Yes, it's officially unofficial. Well, we all know exactly how this is going to play out. We just don't know when. After emerging from his darkness retreat, future Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers has announced that his intention to return for his 19th season and that he intends to do so wearing a different shade of green with the New York Jets. The Packers have announced that they'll go with his wishes and trade him to New York, and while the Jets technically haven't said anything, they have signed one of Rodgers' favorite targets in wideout Allen Lazard. After weeks of hints, the 39-year-old Rodgers officially announced his decision 2 weeks ago on the Pat McAfee show, and since then, nothing has happened. Nada. Bupkis. No trade, no nothing. The rumor is that Green Bay is trying to get a better return for Rodgers than the Jets are willing to offer, but until the two sides work it out, both franchises will essentially be stuck in off-season limbo. And elsewhere in the quarterback landscape, former unanimous MVP Lamar Jackson has officially requested a trade away from the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens placed the non-exclusive franchise tag on Jackson last week, which gives Jackson the freedom to negotiate with other teams. The only problem is that for some reason passing understanding, none of the quarterback-needy teams in the NFL are willing to pay Jackson what he is worth, and some say it's because of Jackson's insistence on a fully guaranteed contract. Make no mistake, Lamar Jackson is one of the best quarterbacks in football. There are not 5 quarterbacks in the world better than he is. Whether this situation is the result of collusion, racism, or just plain incompetence, I don't know. What I do know is that it's a bad look for the league and a detriment to fans of the sport everywhere. And on the business side of football, long-suffering fans in D.C. are ever closer to getting a new owner. With about 20 different scandals on his hands, Washington Commanders owner Dan Snyder, that's him in the picture, is finally selling the team. Groups headed by private equity investor Josh Harris and Canadian billionaire businessman Steve Apostolopoulos are both in excess of $6 billion. $6 billion! And, according to multiple sources, there could still be at least 2 more interested parties out there. Last year, the Denver Broncos were sold for $4.6 billion, and this sale is expected to far surpass that figure. Meanwhile, it is, of course, a national holiday for baseball fans across the country. It's opening day, and already at this hour, we've got news for you. Yankees slugger Aaron Judge homered again this afternoon after setting the AL single-season home run record last year. Also in that game, Garrett Cole struck out 11. Elsewhere, Cardinals pitcher Adam Wainwright sang the national anthem before today's game at Busch Stadium. Jacob deGrom couldn't make it out of the fourth inning in his first outing with his new team, the Texas Rangers. Orioles catcher Adley Rutschman went 5 for 5 with 4 RBI, becoming the first catcher ever to do so on opening day. And of course, the brand new pitch clock rule has reared its ugly head. Rafael Devers of the Boston Red Sox has earned the distinction of becoming the first player to strike out in a regular season major league game for being, quote, inattentive to the pitcher. While the pitch clock aims to speed up ball games, something that even purists like myself admit is badly needed, critics say it does so with no concern for the feel of the game, and that 8 seconds is simply not enough time to get ready to face a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. Oh, and while we're on the subject, we'll get you the first scores of the new season for the local teams. The Minnesota Twins beat the Royals 2-0, and of course, the Brewers dropped their first game to the Cubbies 4-0. Well, that does it for the headlines this week, and now for something completely different. Let's take a look at the first ever Blue Nation Deep Dive. Tonight's topic is one that's been on the minds of fans and academics alike. What's wrong with the Hall of Fame? It's all natural, really. American pro sports grew to such prominence that they needed a way to honor their histories, and especially to honor the people who helped create them. Football, baseball, basketball, and hockey, all of them have a Hall of Fame, and all of them do a great job at curating a collection of moving artifacts to help connect ancient history to modern passion. The problem arises when we actually have to choose who to induct into these Halls of Fame. The Pro Football Hall of Fame has drawn criticism from Deion Sanders for inducting too many players and instead becoming what he calls the Hall of Very Good. Hockey has its own problems too, most notably for allegedly refusing to elect Alexander McGillney over his fear of air travel. But baseball is where this phenomenon is taken to a new height. You can fill books with the things that fans say are wrong with the Baseball Hall of Fame, and plenty of people do. We can talk about whether or not Pete Rose and Barry Bonds and the rest of the steroid guys deserve a spot, sure, or about Gil Hodges waiting decades before finally getting in last year, or all the other guys who deserve to be in the Hall of Fame but aren't, or the group of guys who don't deserve to be in but are anyway, or just the convoluted and often contradictory selection process itself. We can even talk about how the Hall of Fame is located in the tiny village of Cooperstown, New York, because it was the home of the inventor of baseball, Abner Doubleday, even though Abner Doubleday not only didn't invent the sport, but never even claimed that he had. But everybody knows all that stuff. No, we have to look elsewhere. It's time to look at Cooperstown's original sin. Now, in order to do this, I need to talk about a baseball player from the Victorian era. I promise it's more interesting than it sounds. I promise I have a point. Please don't turn the channel over to something else. Just hear me out, okay? We'll get to that. But our story starts in 1936, when the Baseball Hall of Fame inducted its first class. Now, this is what the induction process involves. The Baseball Writers Association of America gets to decide who gets in, and the rules vary from year to year, but basically, eligible members of the association are allowed to vote on a number of players. A player needs to reach 75% of the vote to be inducted. Now, for the inaugural class, the writers elected 5 players: Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth, Honus Wagner, Christy Mathewson, and Walter Johnson. And they got it absolutely right. Even today, almost 90 years later, if you were to start your own Baseball Hall of Fame, those 5 guys would probably still be the first ones in. People who don't care about baseball at all know those names. And if they had left things there, things would have been fine. Of course, they didn't leave things there, because in addition to that vote, there was another vote. The Veterans Committee was created to consider players who had played the majority of their careers in the 19th century. Now, who did they elect in that first class? Nobody! No one got the amount of votes needed to get in. Well, not that year. Of the 60 different players to receive votes in that first Veterans Committee election, 30 of them were eventually elected. The top 7 vote getters all got in no later than 1945. Of the top 15, all but 1 was eventually inducted. All of the top 15 except for Herman Long. Herman Long was a shortstop who was known best for his 12 seasons with the Boston Beaneaters between 1890 and 1902, with whom he won 5 National League pennants. He was pretty good at the plate and even better defensively. So, what kept Long out of the Hall? Well, one of the first things that anyone mentions about Long is that he holds the Major League record for most errors committed in a career with 1,096. If you read a little bit further, though, you'll see that he was regarded as perhaps the best fielding shortstop of his era, and that, at least anecdotally, he amassed as many errors as he did because his fielding range at short was so much greater than that of his contemporaries. Errors were a lot more common in those days, too. You could expect each team to reach double digits in the E column every game. In the 1936 Veterans Committee election that we're talking about, Long received 15.5 votes. The next year, in 1937, he received just 1 vote. In 1938 and 39, just 1 vote each, and then a vote in the 1945 and 1946 elections. None in the decades since. Not only did he never make the Hall, but he never came remotely close to making the Hall again. It doesn't make sense how one year a player can be considered the 8th best player of the entire 19th century, and then the next year he's nobody. And for good measure, let's take a look at some of the guys who were near him in that ballot. Cap Anson and Wee Willie Keeler finished 2 and 3 in the vote. Cy Young, the winningest pitcher of all time, is there at 4th. Ed Delahanty at 5th. And Old Hoss Radburn, who has his own Twitter parody account, is right there at 7th, right ahead of Long. Right after him at 9 and 10 are King Kelly and Amos Rusey. And a few spots back, we see Long's contemporary Fred Clark at 12, Jimmy Collins at 13, and Charles Comiskey at 14. Yes, Comiskey Park Charles Comiskey. The point is that out of these 15 guys, 14 of them were eventually elected into Cooperstown. The 8th best among them wasn't. Let's take a look at Long's page on Baseball Reference. Maybe that'll shed some light onto the subject. He batted .277 with a .335 on-base percentage and a .377 slugging percentage. Good, not great. Still, 91 home runs and over 2,100 hits in the dead ball era is nothing to sneeze at. As far as advanced stats, Long's career wins above replacement, or WAR, is 37, which is above average, but not quite Hall-worthy by most metrics. Not that they were calculating WAR in that 1936 vote. It stands to reason that what sticks out is his defensive WAR of 16.9, which is still 87th all time, more than 115 years since his career ended. He led the National League in defensive WAR in 1898, led the league in homers in 1900, and fielding percentage twice in 1901 and 02. Moreover, he had 4 seasons with an OPS of 800 or better, 2 seasons with more than 100 RBI, and 7 years with more than 100 runs. Again, nothing that'll blow you away, but still good. Baseball Reference's closest player comparison is Pee Wee Reese, who is in the Hall of Fame. You might find yourself asking, what if something happened off the field to change his reputation and keep him out of the Hall? What if he got into trouble with the law? What if he started saying controversial things like Curt Schilling does? I ask myself that too. There was nothing. Long died of tuberculosis in 1909, just 5 years after his playing career ended. Look, I'll level with you. I don't actually know if Herman Long belongs in the Hall of Fame or not. He was one of the best defensive players of his time, sure, but he was pretty average at the plate, and his stats don't quite hold up here in the 21st century. But that's not the point here. The point is that in 1936, Long was almost a lock for the Hall. By the next year, he was completely forgotten, and no one has any idea why. So when you ask, what's wrong with the Hall of Fame? I still don't have an answer for you. But I do know that whatever it is has been there since the very beginning. Thanks, Noah. Great report. Well, that closes the book on this episode of Blue Nation. We certainly hope you've enjoyed it. For now, I've done all the damage I can do here. To find more episodes of Blue Nation and other great TV10 content, visit us at mytv10.uwec.edu or check us out on YouTube or TikTok before they ban it. From all of us here at the studio, I'm Noah Schwartz. Good night, everybody.